Welcome to Golden Flame Stars, your ultimate sanctuary for nostalgia, where the neon lights of yesteryear never truly fade, and the whispers of the past still echo through the canyons of Tinseltown. Who was your ultimate Hollywood crush back in the day? Was it the mesmerizing, free-spirited beauties of 70s cinema? Or perhaps the glamorous, power-dressed queens who ruthlessly ruled the 80s primetime soaps? These iconic women did not just capture our attention through a glowing glass screen. They shaped American style from coast to coast, filled our teenage bedrooms with glossy posters, and defined the romantic aspirations of an entire generation. Today, we are taking a deeply atmospheric, nostalgic trip down memory lane to celebrate these timeless idols, exploring not just the blinding brilliance of their peak years, but the quiet, hidden paths they walked when the studio lights finally went dark. How many of these legendary faces do you still remember? Drop your absolute favorite in the comments below and let us unravel the tapestry of a golden era. The story of modern television and cinema cannot be written without the intoxicating allure of these sirens, women who possessed a rare, magnetic sparkle that seemed to promise eternal youth and flawless perfection. Think of the platinum blonde glamour of Donna Mills, whose piercing blue eyes and polished confidence turned a seductive villain in Knots Landing into an unforgettable symbol of 80s power and makeup elegance. At 85, she remains a testament to timeless beauty, yet, behind that sharp screen presence lies the fierce determination of a woman who had to fight for her place in a studio system that often chewed up and spit out its brightest stars. Or consider the smoky feline grace of Adrienne Barbeau, who brought a seductive strength and fearless charisma from the Broadway stage of Grease straight into the dark, misty worlds of cult horror classics like The Fog and Swamp Thing. These women were the architects of desire, architects who masked their personal sacrifices behind heavy curtains of velvet and silk, presenting a flawless facade to a public that demanded perfection at any cost. Yet, for every star who maintained her grip on the crown, there were those whose brilliance was accompanied by a poignant, quiet vulnerability, a hint of impending downfall, or a sudden departure from the blinding spotlight. The sultry, playful confidence of Valerie Perrine captured the world in Lenny, earning her an Oscar nomination, and made her unforgettable as Eve Teschmacher in Superman. But her path was one carved through immense hidden pain and personal struggle before she passed away at 82. We look at the wholesome, golden-haired innocence of Diane Kay on 8 is Enough, or the cool, dangerous beauty of Rebecca De Mornay in Risky Business, and we begin to realize that the fairy tale of Hollywood was often a beautiful illusion. There was a lingering melancholy behind those bright smiles, a quiet understanding that the very industries celebrating their youth would eventually look for younger faces. As we prepare to pull back the velvet curtain and examine the behind-the-scenes intrigues, the sudden vanishings, and the hushed studio secrets that defined their lives, we must ask ourselves what it truly cost to be an idol in an era built on beautiful lies. Stay with us, because the true drama was never what was written in the script, it was what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. To step behind the heavy velvet curtains of Hollywood during its most intoxicating decades is to enter a world where the air was thick with perfume, champagne, and the relentless pressure to maintain an impossible standard of perfection. As the 70s bled into the high-octane 80s, the path to fame became a dizzying, high-stakes game where a single look, a signature hairstyle, or a husky tone of voice could instantly transform an unknown hopeful into a household name. This was the era of the Golden Ascent, a time when women like Linda Day George brought a unique blend of elegance and danger to action-packed masterpieces like Mission: Impossible, proving that a leading lady could be just as lethal as she was lovely. For a few glorious years, these women inhabited the absolute pinnacle of global celebrity, their faces plastered across every magazine kiosk, their names whispered in the VIP booths of the most exclusive clubs, and their presence demanding the utmost reverence from studio executives who viewed them as living, breathing gold mines. The golden years were defined by a dazzling, almost overwhelming intensity, where the line between reality and the characters played on screen began to blur into a single, seamless narrative of luxury and desire. Morgan Fairchild emerged during this peak as the definitive face of primetime sophistication, a vision of icy blonde beauty and razor-sharp confidence who commanded every square inch of the frame in legendary sagas like Flamingo Road and Falcon Crest. To the millions of viewers tuning in each week, she embodied an untouchable, aristocratic allure, an archetype of feminine power that seemed entirely bulletproof. Nearby on the broadcasting schedule, Victoria Principal was captivating the globe as Pamela Barnes Ewing in Dallas, providing the emotional heartbeat to a sprawling family rivalry that shattered television viewing records worldwide. These actresses were trapped in a beautiful, relentless whirlwind of flashing paparazzi bulbs, couture dress fittings, and high-profile promotional tours that kept them perpetually suspended in a state of hyper-visible perfection, leaving almost no room for a private life outside the public eye. Yet, behind this magnificent, highly polished facade, the first structural cracks in the fantasy were already beginning to form as the intense pressure of the studio system took its inevitable toll. The very rooms that echoed with applause during the day became arenas of quiet desperation at night, as the demanding schedules of television and film production required 12-hour workdays, endless script rewrites, and an unyielding commitment to physical youth. Michelle Lee, who carried the dramatic weight of Knots Landing for over a decade, as the fiercely loyal Karen Fairgate Mackenzie, understood better than anyone the sheer stamina required to anchor a primetime phenomenon while navigating the shifting whims of network executives. Beneath the surface of the glamorous industry, a complex web of behind-the-scenes intrigues was constantly spinning, where rivalries were actively manufactured by publicity departments to keep the ratings high, and where actresses found themselves constantly fighting for fair compensation, better scripts, and the basic respect their male counterparts received without question. As the tension mounted, the glittering illusion began to reveal its hidden costs, showing that the spotlight could be a deeply isolating place for those who dared to show even a hint of human vulnerability. Deidre Hall, ruling daytime television as the iconic Marlena Evans in Days of Our Lives, navigated some of the most emotionally exhausting storylines in broadcasting history, capturing the absolute devotion of millions while carrying the relentless, year-round workload of a daily soap opera. At the same time, international stars like Ornella Muti were learning that crossing over into the American studio system meant confronting a whole new set of demands, where her breathtaking European elegance and luminous eyes were heavily commodified for sci-fi extravaganzas like Flash Gordon. The industry loved the sparkle of its leading ladies, but it was notoriously indifferent to their personal struggles, treating their health, their happiness, and their peace of mind as secondary to the box office returns and weekly Nielsen ratings. This environment of high-stress glamour and unwritten studio rules forced many of these legends to develop a protective armor, a way to smile through the exhaustion and the brewing storms of their personal lives. Stephanie Powers balanced the sophisticated, romantic mystery of Heart to Heart with a quiet, deeply private resilience, while Melody Thomas Scott channeled her own intense personal growth and emotional depth into the tumultuous life of Nikki Newman on The Young and the Restless. They were masters of the public smile, professionals who understood that the audience wanted the fantasy, not the fatigue. Susan Anton, with her striking height and multi-talented presence that conquered everything from variety shows to the glittering stages of Las Vegas, lived the relentless hustle of an ultimate entertainer, constantly on display, constantly maintaining the high-energy sparkle that the public demanded. But as the golden years marched onward, the first real difficulties could no longer be hidden behind clever lighting, expert makeup, and protective press releases. The industry was changing, and with that change came a sharper, more unforgiving attitude toward the very women who had built its modern empire. Lorette Spang McCook found herself navigating the sudden, passionate cult fame of Battlestar Galactica, experiencing firsthand how quickly Hollywood could embrace a face and how easily it could pigeonhole a talented actress into a specific genre. Connie Sellecca brought intelligence and classic romance to primetime hits like Hotel, navigating the complex corporate politics of major networks while trying to maintain her artistic integrity in an environment that increasingly favored sensationalism over substance. The pristine, sun-kissed imagery of Charlene Tilton as Lucy Ewing in Dallas captured the playful, rebellious energy of the decade, making her a global marketing force. Yet the intense scrutiny regarding her appearance and her personal choices served as a constant reminder that in Hollywood, a woman's career was often treated as a public commodity. The stage was slowly being set for a major shift, a collective turning point where the hidden dramas, the quiet rebellions, and the fractures in the glass castle could no longer be kept behind closed doors. When the final chime of the 80s faded, and the gritty, unpolished realism of the 90s took hold, the grand illusion of the studio system suffered a massive, irreversible shock. The pristine facades that had protected the gods and goddesses of the silver screen began to crack wide open, revealing a world of devastating scandals, industry blacklisting, and deeply buried trauma that had been kept under wraps by powerful executives for years. It was during this turbulent era that the true harrowing cost of stardom was finally laid bare, proving that behind the closed doors of those sun-drenched Beverly Hills mansions lay a battlefield of broken spirits and stolen youth. The wholesome girl-next-door innocence that had once been the gold standard of American entertainment suddenly collided with a harsher reality as the public began to realize that the vibrant, smiling faces they welcomed into their living rooms every week were navigating dark, treacherous waters entirely on their own. Now where was this hidden friction more evident than in the life of Valerie Bertinelli, whose fresh-faced, sweetheart image on One Day at a Time had made her an American treasure, but whose private life became a high-wire act of dealing with the chaotic, rock-and-roll lifestyle of the era and the immense pressure to stay impossibly thin and perpetually cheerful. For years, the studios and the major networks worked overtime to sanitize the narratives of their stars, employing massive publicity machines to suppress any rumors of personal exhaustion, addiction, or mental collapse. Joyce DeWitt, who brought such brilliant comedic timing and grounded warmth to Three's company, found herself trapped in an environment of intense behind-the-scenes friction and sudden network betrayals, where the sudden, tragic fracturing of caste relationships left her deeply disillusioned with the cutthroat nature of the business. The industry demanded absolute compliance, and those who showed signs of independence or struggled with the grueling emotional demands of their overnight fame were often cast aside or quietly replaced, while the tabloids were weaponized to shift the blame entirely onto the shoulders of the actresses themselves. The turning point for many of these idols arrived when the sheer weight of public expectation and private suffering could no longer be countered by non-disclosure agreements and studio fixer intervention. Think of Christy McNichol, the fiercely talented two-time Emmy-winning darling of the series family, whose raw emotional honesty and immense all-American charm made her one of the biggest teen idols on the planet. Behind that brilliant screen presence, McNichol was battling a severe, deeply private emotional crisis brought on by the relentless, suffocating pressures of childhood stardom and an industry that offered no sanctuary for genuine human vulnerability. Her sudden, mysterious departure from high-profile projects shocked the industry and left fans bewildered. As the studio bosses chose to remain silent or whisper about unreliability, rather than openly addressing the immense psychological toll their star-making machine inflicted on the young. It was a pattern repeated across the decades, a silent agreement among the Hollywood elite that the show must go on, even if it meant destroying the very people who made the show a success. This culture of enforced silence and hidden suffering extended far into the realms of blockbuster cinema, where the stakes were even higher and the falls from grace were catastrophic. Lauren Tews, the bright, sunny face of hospitality as Julie McCoy on The Love Boat, saw her life engulfed by the rampant dark excesses that flooded the industry during the peak of her success, leading to a sudden, highly publicized dismissal from the show that had made her a global icon. The public devoured the scandalous headlines, but few understood the immense isolation and the predatory environment that fostered such downfalls, where young stars were surrounded by enablers and left entirely unprotected by the corporations profiting off their image. Kathleen Turner, who had redefined modern cinematic sensuality with her gravelly, dangerous voice and explosive performance in Body Heat, faced a different, deeply unjust form of industry abandonment. When she began experiencing the agonizing, debilitating symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, the industry did not offer support. Instead, Rumors circulated that she had become difficult, demanding, or erratic, simply because she was struggling to walk and move on set. The fiercely independent actress was forced to retreat into selective theatre work and voiceovers, watching as a fickle town turned its back on one of its most brilliant creative forces simply because her body could no longer conform to their rigid standards of physical perfection. The psychological warfare of the studio system also manifested in the way it treated its most daring and unconventional beauties, forcing them into bizarre boxes or penalizing them for their artistic eccentricity. Rosanna Arquette, whose bohemian, free-spirited allure in desperately seeking Susan defined the artistic edge of the 80s, eventually found herself facing a sudden, inexplicable freeze in her career progression after standing her ground against the predatory, behind-the-scenes power dynamics that ruled the studio boardrooms for decades. Society and the media kept silent about these casting couch secrets, choosing to label brilliant, defiant women as complicated or faded, rather than exposing the corrupt system that sought to control them. Heather Locklear, the ultimate primetime bombshell who had dominated both Dynasty and Melrose Place with her unparalleled glamour, entered a long, highly publicized cycle of personal struggles, legal battles, and intense emotional trauma that played out under the cruel, unforgiving lens of the paparazzi. The very culture that had worshipped her sun-kissed beauty now took a sadistic pleasure in chronicling her moments of profound human weakness, offering no path to redemption or healing within the hollow halls of show business. Even those who managed to maintain a pristine public reputation, like the ethereal Daryl Hannah or the fiercely independent Deborah Winger, had to wage quiet, exhausting wars behind closed doors just to protect their autonomy and artistic integrity. Winger famously walked away from massive star-making roles at the absolute peak of her power, refusing to participate in an industry that she felt stripped women of their dignity and treated them as mere props for male narratives. Kim Basinger, despite reaching the pinnacle of global sex symbol status in 9.5 weeks and winning an Academy Award for LA Confidential, faced catastrophic financial ruin and intense legal battles after backing out of a controversial film project, demonstrating how quickly the system could turn on an icon who dared to change her mind. The glittering facade of Hollywood was never a paradise. It was a beautifully constructed cage of glass and gold. And as the millennium approached, the courageous choices of these women to walk away, to fight back, or to seek healing in the shadows completely redefined what it meant to be a survivor in the unforgiving kingdom of entertainment. As the dust of those tumultuous decades finally settled, the true enduring legacy of these cinematic and television pioneers began to take on a profound, deeply respected shape. These women did not merely fade into the background of cultural history. Instead, they carved out rich, multifaceted lives that proved their worth extended far beyond the fickle whims of casting directors and network ratings. For many, the final years of the 20th century and the opening decades of the 21st became a time of magnificent reinvention, quiet artistic fulfillment, and a deliberate return to their own authentic terms. They transformed themselves from the commodified idols of a passing era into the revered architects of their own destinies, leaving an indelible mark on the entertainment industry that continues to inspire new generations of performers today. Look at the extraordinary narrative of Demi Moore, who epitomized the peak of 90s Hollywood A-list stardom with her commanding screen presence and fierce independence. After navigating years of intense public scrutiny, she staged a monumental, breathtaking career resurgence that culminated in her explosive performance in the horror satire film The Substance, which premiered to widespread acclaim at Cannes and subsequently earned her a well-deserved Golden Globe victory alongside her very first Academy Award nomination. This spectacular second act sent a thunderous message through the halls of modern cinema, proving that an actress of profound maturity and fierce dedication could completely shatter the traditional, ageist barriers of Tinseltown. Similarly, Jamie Lee Curtis evolved from the definitive, athletic scream queen of the original Halloween franchise into a foundational pillar of Hollywood royalty, securing her own historic Oscar win for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and continuing to receive immense critical praise for her deeply moving work in projects like The Last Showgirl. These women stood as living, breathing proof that true cinematic power does not diminish with time. It simply ripens into something infinitely more potent and iconic, away from the blinding glare of the cameras. Many of these legendary beauties discovered that their greatest fulfillment lay in completely unexpected passions, choosing to redirect their immense creative energies into fields far removed from the studio lots. Karen Allen, whose warm, fiercely intelligent portrayal of Marion Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark made her a permanent fixture in cinematic history, gracefully balanced her occasional acting work by establishing a highly successful, thriving textile design studio, prioritizing her lifelong passion for the fiber arts over the hollow pursuit of constant celebrity. Angelica Houston, forever immortalized as the aristocratic, commanding Morticia Addams in The Addams Family, transitioned seamlessly into writing critically acclaimed memoirs, directing, and dedicating much of her life to passionate animal advocacy and humanitarian causes. Jessica Lange, whose fragile yet quietly wild sensuality initially captivated the globe in King Kong, maintained her legendary status as an acting powerhouse while simultaneously earning serious global recognition as an accomplished fine art photographer, capturing the raw, unvarnished beauty of the world through her lens for others. The legacy was built on a foundation of steadfast longevity and an unwavering commitment to their craft, refusing to let the industry dictate when their time in the spotlight should end. The magnificent Glenn Close remained a golden standard for dramatic intensity and patrician elegance, transitioning effortlessly between prestigious television series and major motion pictures, always earning universal acclaim for her staggering range. Sally Field transformed her beloved Girl Next Door warmth into a legacy of Oscar-winning strength, remaining highly visible not only through vibrant screen projects like 80 for Brady, but also as a fiercely passionate social and political activist. Even in the realm of daytime and primetime television, stars like Julianne Moore and Courtney Cox built massive, enduring empires. Cox elegantly expanded her influence from the historic comedic heights of Friends into producing, directing, and founding her own wildly successful luxury home and lifestyle brand, HomeCourt, ensuring her status as a modern entrepreneurial force as the years marched forward. A sense of deep, comforting nostalgia enveloped those stars who chose to embrace a much quieter, private existence, far away from the relentless media circus. Icons of pure, undeniable glamour like Kim Basinger and Sybil Shepherd deliberately chose to step back from the exhausting demands of public life, finding peace in family, writing, and environmental causes, allowing their legendary filmographies to speak for themselves. The unforgettable European goddess, Sophie Marceau, continued to captivate international audiences by working selectively on projects that met her high artistic standards, maintaining her signature. Intelligent magnetism through privacy and an unmistakable air of cinematic mystery. Meanwhile, multi-talented trailblazers like Lucy Liu successfully shattered cultural barriers in Ally McBeal and Charlie's Angels, continuing to act and direct while simultaneously earning deep respect in the international art world. Exhibiting her stunning visual artwork under her traditional name, Yu Ling. Ultimately, the magnificent journey of these extraordinary women from the 70s, 80s, and 90s reminds us that true stardom is never defined by a single decade, a fleeting trend, or the cruel limitations an industry attempts to place on a performer. Whether they chose to reclaim the spotlight with newfound, resilient strength like Heather Locklear, rule the independent film circuit, or walk away entirely to find solace in a simpler life, their collective impact on American and global culture remains absolute. They gave a voice, a face, and a beating heart to the dreams of millions, their images permanently etched into the celluloid framework of history. As we look back on their incredible lives, their private struggles, and their triumphant legacies, we realize that the golden flame of their talent was never something Hollywood gave to them. It was a brilliance they carried entirely within themselves, a timeless light that no amount of time can ever truly extinguish. It is wild to trace how the conversation around aging, beauty standards, and institutional pushback in Hollywood has evolved over the decades. The women who dominated the screens in the 1970s and 1980s faced incredible pressure to fit into manufactured, hyper-polished boxes. frequently running into a system built to benefit from their youth and discard them as time went on. What makes the current landscape so fascinating is how that exact narrative is being systematically dismantled by the icons themselves. The modern resurgence of old Hollywood legacy's starkest contrast to the historical studio system is found in how modern icons are reclaiming their power on their own terms. Rather than allowing the industry to dictate their expiration dates, stars from this era have engineered massive second acts that demand critical institutional recognition. Demi Moore at the 2026 Academy Awards. Istochnik, Kevin Mazur images Jamie Lee Curtis celebrating industry recognition. Istochnik, Let's Go to the Movies Oscars 2024. Red carpet, Jamie Lee Curtis, Let's Go to the Movies key shifts in industry power dynamics reclaiming the narrative. The satirical body horror hit, The Substance, served as a massive cultural vehicle for Demi Moore, directly mirroring and weaponizing the societal pressures she and her peers faced during the peak of their early fame. Her recent Golden Globe win and historic Oscar nomination mark a point where the industry was forced to reward the critique of its own toxic beauty standards, decoupling value from the studio as highlighted in your script. Icons like Courtney Cox via Homecourt and Karen Allen via her textile design studio broke out of the actor-only framework to establish multi-million-dollar brands and artistic ventures. By doing so, they created their own equity, ensuring they were no longer dependent on casting directors who favored a specific, fleeting demographic. The power of radical longevity, Jamie Lee Curtis, transitioning seamlessly into an Oscar-winning force, alongside Glenn Close remaining the absolute standard for prestige television drama, highlights a major structural shift. Longevity is no longer treated as an anomaly, it is treated as an active